We know that.
Yeah.
We can tell by seeing good encouragement.
Well, I appreciate that. Okay. Well, I've been through a lot of fire to get there, man. It didn't come by pure skill. It came because I was criticized a lot. No. See, I used to have a guy, and true story, I used to have a guy, every single class, article I'd write, sermon I'd preach, he would get up there publicly during church and just criticize me for like 3 years straight, every single one. In church, and during worship. Weird, right? That's why I left. 3 years is a long time to go through that. Anyway, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see y'all. We're continuing on our study through the parables of Jesus. If you can, go ahead and turn to the talents this morning, Matthew 25, 14 through 30. The parable of the talents, Matthew 25, 14 through 30. And this one, we understand a talent is what? Is it money or is it skill? In this normal talk of the Bible, it's dealing with what? Money. Now, at the outset, how much do you think one talent is worth? Thousands? Well, yeah, it's thousands. Yeah. Okay. I want to get this at the outset. That way, when you read it, you can kind of put some numbers together. All right. What I have found, now there are two different talents inside of the world of the Bible. There is what's called the Syrian talent, which from what I saw was like $40,000. And then my understanding is that the Jews normally, though, adopted the Babylonian talent, which is $63,200. So that's the one that we're going to associate with.
For one talent?
For one. Yes. So I gave it backwards. It's $62,300. But so we're going to associate the Babylonian one with this one. That's one my understanding was the more normal use talent by the Jews. So I want to get that here. That way when we read it, I'm going to say the other number as we go. But that's kind of where you get from, okay? All right. Matthew 25. Let me get there. 14 through 30. For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents. Okay, 5 talents, according to my numbers here, is $311,500. Okay. The next one he gave 2 talents. That is dealing with $124,600. And last one he gave 1, $62,300. All right. And to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. And so then he who had received 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5 talents. Likewise, he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug it in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So he who had received the talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Matthew 25:22 now. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I'll make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, You wicked, and you labor where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who had 10 talents. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he who will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. All right. Now, a few quick things about this. What do you see about the reception of the 5-talent man and the 2-talent man? What was the Lord's or the Master's reception of those 2 individuals?
You're talking about after you give them the talent, or
Yeah.
it was happy and joyful.
Happy and joyful. He said twice, enter into the joy of my Lord. All right. Now, when you think about this, what did they do that was so good? For him to call them good and faithful. What were they doing so good at?
Invested what they had and return money.
Yeah. Yeah. Good investment on return, ROI.
In other words, they invested it and got a profit back from it to where he had more money coming back.
Yeah. 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 Better investment. All right. But the 1-talent man, what did he do? Why do you think he went and dug it inside the field? Didn't want to lose it?
Fear.
Fear? Yeah.
Maybe his ability was a lot less limited than the other 2. So if you go back to the beginning, he said he gave each talents according to their abilities.
Hmm?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and that's another thing you have to say too. Each according to his ability. So they all had different abilities that he could see before he even went to them to give them the money.
Mm-hmm. Sure, definitely. Definitely.
From what he saw, that he could see that they were doing with how they was already doing what they were doing for him.
Mm-hmm. Now, go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, I agree with also, I think he's calling lazy because something is better than nothing. So you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have that knowledge, like, these other guys, they put it in the bank, I can get a little something. I can say, hey, I did something. But you're giving me the same thing that I gave you. But I have probably an expectation that you're going to, do something with it. Give me more type of profit.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what you got, Sandy?
I was just curious, I didn't realize that they had quote unquote banks. I mean, what was the bank system back then?
Money exchanging?
Years?
Yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah, Temple.
Changers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of the ran through the Temple tax. Obviously, you really had 2 kinds of money happening. Because, surprisingly enough, the Romans were not directly involved in the banks of the Jews.
Yeah.
But they were involved in taxation of the Jews. So, that's like we have the toll tax, that kind of stuff. And the seat of receipt there, Matthew 9 and other things. But I believe this is dealing with the Jewish bank system. And so as Craig was saying, it's more of the exchanging of goods, kind of like how ours is. I don't think that they were as involved in like mortgages and stuff like how ours are today, But it is interesting here because these individuals, these three guys, would be servants. Now, normally when you think about a servant, we think about someone who has pretty much a stewardship of his master's household and maybe his goods, looking after certain interests, kind of like a manager type thing for the household, where the master may give a servant, certain limitations, certain boundaries in which to work, whereas these individuals operated on a different servant system because they actually were dealing with actual money. And these guys are going out and actually being industrious with the money. And the idea is getting more in return for their master. But the servant at this time is not like how you may think about a servant today, inside of our cultural understanding. The servant of their time could own property. He could have his own family, have his own house. He didn't have to go and be part of that person's exact address. He was able to be, obviously in this case, industrious with his money. He was more of like a hireling type thing than actual, more than actual enslavement type thing. He was more of an actual hireling. He was hired in kind of as an employee, but has more of a very contract to work with than what we may have inside of our world. And so this servant is a little bit different than how we may think about, say, a slave or somebody who might be more indentured. This would be more of just a general, I think kind of more of a general hireling employee type servant deal. Okay. Now, when you look at this, of course, you see the master's few things here. Number one, from verses 14 and 15, yes, there are 4 traits of the master that he gave or that he portrays to his servants. Do you know what those 4 things are? I have 4 things, maybe 5, but I've got 4. Trustworthy, because this man left, didn't he? He went to a far country. All right, trustworthy. Go ahead.
And also, it was basically like he was giving them a loan or some type, because he had trusted, like he said, he had trusted him with the talents to use his day felt was good for him. Mm-hmm. And the person, what he did is invested it.
Yeah.
And see, that's another thing that he took what he got from him and used it for a better purpose, to better even his lifestyle by investing it.
Yeah.
So that when he came back, he had something to, actually put a master to see that he had progressed with what he gave him.
Right.
He had what he called he had made more money.
Right.
Than what he had that he gave.
Right. All right. So I think, would you say he was generous? You say he was generous?
Not really.
You think he was generous?
Because at the end of the day, it says he knew, so he had an understanding, right? So sometimes I say you gotta know your audience. So I know what you're capable of, so I'm gonna give you this. If I have a certain expectation because you can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give this amount to this guy because I know he can handle this. This one, I'm just gonna give him the lowest amount, but hopefully he's gonna do something. So I have an understanding of who I'm giving this a certain amount of money to.
Mm-hmm.
So I can be generous, but I'm not stupid. So I'm about my money. So I'm not gonna give the guy that has no skills $300,000.
Yeah.
I think that's how it works.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Let me get my notes in that. Very fair. So you would say he'd be more prudent. He's more trying to use this money wisely. Yeah. All right. It is interesting here that he's universal in his giving. Now, not the amount, but it seems to be that to each servant he gave X, Y, Z, whatever amount it is. Okay? What you got?
Each had probably different things that they was doing to impress him enough to trust him with that, the finances that he did. You know,
Yeah.
They all had different things that they was doing, and before he left, he knew he was gonna be gone for however long. To where he didn't have to worry about what they was doing for him, it was being taken care of.
Mhm.
Glitches.
Right.
Yeah, but when he came back, this is what he saw, you know. Each one came and they followed up by reporting to it. And he was satisfied with the first two, and then, like he said, the last one, to me, the last one kind of was busy contemplating how the master was instead of what he could have done with the money.
Yeah.
Because he go and say that he didn't do nothing with it because he saw that the master was harsh,
Mm-hmm.
and he saw that the master was he said, because in verse 24, he said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid. So see, that's another thing. He even had a subconscious fear. He said, wait a minute, what can I do just to keep myself out of trouble? And then he go, I'll beg you.
Yeah.
He just made that decision,
Right. Right. Yeah.
which in the end,
I'm gonna get
for
you.
the circumstances, it was a bad decision.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And he didn't have to face that till he came back.
Right. Right.
And then he had plenty of time to go dig it up and do something with it. He still had time to go dig it up and use it, but he chose it. Leave it there.
Yeah. Yeah. He did. What you got, Crystal?
So I think 15 where it says to each according to his own ability,
You okay?
and immediately he went on the journey. So he basically was a good investor. He basically found out what the person's abilities were and how much I'm going to give you according to your abilities, because me as an investor, I want my interest. I want to get something in return. So it's not just me giving you money, I'm giving you this money, but I'm expecting, something in return in a sense. So it's kind of like the others got the money, made more, and they were blessed with more. When the other one that was just, quote unquote, to me it was kind of an excuse to state that he was afraid. You weren't afraid to go ahead and take the money. Had you been afraid, you would have stated that from the beginning, but you weren't afraid to take the money. But however, you knew that you needed to put in work, and the work you did not want to put in, so you hid it instead of actually using the abilities that you had that made me give you this amount of money. So I think like with this lesson, it's kind of like, when you want something, you know that you have to put in the work in order to continuously be blessed. But if you stay with faith, these individuals, they had faith, they knew the potential, they went out, they worked, they flipped it. However, but if you don't really have, if you're scared, you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, oh, I don't know, and you just think that you're just gonna keep on receiving, that's not how it works. And I think that's kind of like what I get from this girl.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. What you got?
I think that as the owner, he was very discerning of their capabilities. And he didn't give more responsibility to a person who was not able to follow through. And had he done that, then he would have lost more. But he was discerning of their capabilities and used his wisdom to dispense what he needed to accordingly.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
But he had enough faith in all of them. He gave them all the opportunity to invest the money, but one would just have fear in him. And because of that fear, he didn't have that motivation, that determination to go out and make more money.
Mhm.
So he felt safe in putting the money in the hole and covering it up.
Yeah. Now, yes, I'm Craig.
Keep thinking about, he determines everything by their abilities. Who gives the abilities? Abilities come from God. And the last guy did not glorify God with the ability that he gave.
Yeah. And if you were to transition this to the church, how is this like the church? Because this is all a parable of the church. How many people dig their talents in and never see again? No. I know people that have great capabilities and they only use it for their own world, and that's understandable, for their job, for their lifestyle. But when it comes to the church, I've seen many just, I don't want to do it for them because I do it all day long with other things, but I have to do it over here with y'all. I've seen that a little bit. But if you have an ability and if you have the skill and the know-how, why not help the church out? Why not make the church any better? What you got?
And I think it's really going back to what Craig said about glorifying God. It's funny because now you see a lot of NFL players who, when they win the game or even before they play the game, you see them now they're praying or, they're giving God thanks because they won and things of that nature when you didn't see too much of that. Even last year, during football season where anybody was trying to give the glory to God, whether they're doing it for, the platform or just, or they're actually genuinely doing it, it's something that wasn't happening before and that's happening now. So they were given the ability, they have the skills, but who are you giving the glory to when you execute, when you win, when you achieve your goals, like who are you giving that glory to? And I think that determines on what you're going to get in return.
Yeah. And, when you think about the world itself is viewed as God's footstool. And the idea of it is everything in the world is God's. And 2 Corinthians 4 says that we are to be servants, or stewards rather, of what God has given us. We know from, of course, dealing with money, that money is not inherently evil. It's the love of money that is bad. 1 Timothy 6:17 and 18. And how James 5 says is like a canker. Another word there might be gangrene or cancer. And that's the love of money there. But when you think about this whole idea on being a proper steward and being a proper worker and in this case investor, having that certain kind of skill set to use to know how to get more return on your investment, that it does require, of course, as we've already mentioned, a great degree of honesty. It requires a certain degree of prudence. But also, I would say it requires a certain degree of simplicity. You don't see that they went out and they created a massive organization. You see that all they did is went out and they just worked with it. We don't know what they did to get there. But sometimes people, I think, view the church and they say, well, if I can't create some massive thing, if I can't get the credit for this, whatever it may be, I don't want to do anything. Because, the work's too much. I know this is going to be too much. Well, my question is if you didn't do it now, what's going to make it happen later? And if the community is really counting on us as the church to be there for the community, and we choose rather to not do anything, what's going to change between this group and the next group? Why are they going to have their lights clicked on and our lights going to be clicked off? It won't happen that way. It's all generational. And so, all this, I think, is very interesting because when you look at how he's going to liken this to the kingdom of heaven to the church, is when you think about the church of the Bible, these guys, the apostles, were ones that were out preaching everywhere in the synagogues, and they were willingly going into enemy territory. Paul went to Athens, Acts 17. Acts 8 says that the apostles even stayed home, and the church went everywhere preaching the word. Acts 8:4. And so it's interesting here that all these things give us a prime example on what they did with their talents. In 1 Peter 4, verse 11, it says that your abilities come from who? From God. That's it. That's what the Bible says. 1 Peter 4, verse 11 it says that you have been given the abilities which God giveth you. So pretty short and simple, I think. Psalm 19 goes into quite a good detail about this. But we think about all these things. Of course, we want to, and as we do live faithfully, we want to give God the glory more. That's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 3, 6 through 9. Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered, but who gave the increase? God did. Yeah. And so when it comes to the talents, it comes to our abilities, when you work, and what I've always been amazed at with this particular congregation is it seems to be that almost any time we do any work, really any work in the community, we get a good result somewhere. It's very interesting, and so I think, that there is great potential, there's great promise, so we should never be discouraged with doing anything. This is my thing here. Don't be discouraged wanting to do more work. Try to help the church out more. Don't be discouraged trying to think of how this thing has to be so complicated and complex when these guys, I think, were being very simple. Keep it simple. Keep it easy, manageable, sustainable. A few of the things about the reckoning here between 19 and 30. The first two servants were commended, and they were both promoted. Some have suggested there that these guys served as kind of like apprentices, perhaps, inside of the world. They were kind of like an apprenticeship, it seems. They were given higher positions, and they passed from service into joy, and they each were given a ground of protection. He was able, successful, and faithful, but he was also rewarded because of his faithfulness. And the third one, though, forecasting his Lord's displeasure, came forward with a defense. I'm afraid of this man. You're a hard individual. You see that a lack of action on his part called for a excuse, or as one of God in my notes here calls it, a multiplicity of words. You see that the other guys didn't say anything, did they? It's the response to the other two individuals. They let their work show itself. But the third guy, he's going to give something about it. You ever been there where you know that you didn't do something and you're like just waiting to not be called on, and then, oh, you're called on now. Well, where's that? Well, listen, something happened. I tell you, one time we were trying to recruit some members to do a big benevolent program we had inside the community. What we had decided as a church where I was at the time, we worked a lot with the school system, and we did a lot and we were inside a very poor area. And so we did a lot of things like meals for kids, Thanksgiving for kids, Christmas for kids, very benevolent things all the time. And it was wonderful. We had a very big benevolent program happening. It was great stuff. But anyway, when we were in the process of trying to do a Thanksgiving meal, what we did is, instead of having it at the building, we would all contribute. We'd have someone go out and buy all the food from the grocery store, the turkeys and stuff, and then we would all get in our cars and drive up to their house. They could eat with their families for Thanksgiving. And so we did that. And when we were recruiting somebody, I want to give you 3 real life excuses that were given me when we were doing this process. One lady who had committed, we called her and said, "Where are you at?" "Well, I can't come." "Why not?" "Well, my granddaughter is in a dress sitting on me." And so I go, "Okay, great. What does that mean?" The second person we called, he was a gentleman, and we said, "Well, where you at, man? You said you're gonna be here at whatever time it is. It's already 30 minutes past. What you okay? Everything okay? You gonna still come in and help us out with something?" And he made the comment that he had forgotten it was today. That's fine. So you can still come or not? "Well, no, because now I'm outside wearing dirty shoes." "Okay, great." Call somebody else and say, "Where are you at?" And they came in, and they came in very, very, very late. And they said, "Well, I knew it was at 12 noon. We're going to come over here and take these turkeys and stuff over to these houses, and it's going to be great, good, wonderful." And we had a good turnout anyways. The church had about 50. We had about 25 show up. So it was a good turnout. But anyway, but we had another lady come in, another guy rather come in, and he came in very, very late. And we said, "Man, you miss all the fun, and just trying to be, positive about it, I guess." Anyway, he said he couldn't come any earlier because his dog ate some bad food and was vomiting. He wanted to watch the dog vomit. So, okay, well, man, that's great. To me, it sounds kind of crazy, doesn't it? And what's funny though is how many people do you think gave excuse when they showed up and they were working? Nobody. Everyone said, "Where can we go? Let's go." It's only when they missed opportunity, then they said, "Well, this thing happened." And we use the lady with the girl on her lap for one of our personal family favorites. We always do that one. It's a funny excuse to make. But anyways, so this man was one that he's going to give some excuse, some words. He's going to try to figure this, talk himself out. And, what do you think he's trying to generate with his master when he says, "I thought you were a hard man"? Who wants to be told you're a hard man? You ever told your boss you're a hard guy to work for? And in all seriousness, you probably haven't. If you have, it's probably because the last day is coming soon. That's not normal behavior. And so what would this guy expect to happen? So of course we see from the verses here that he was afraid. Verse 25, I think it was. He said, "I was afraid and went and hid your talent." Notice that I hid your talent. He didn't hide his own. He hid his master's one, didn't he? And so I think that's dealing also with God's given us these things. So when I'm not using it, it's not that I'm not using it for myself. I'm not using what God's given me to help please God. Okay. And so he was having to face retribution. He was rebuked. His talent was taken, and he was cast in a dismal darkness. The ground for retribution was he was incapable, he was unsuccessful, and he was lastly unfaithful. And so he was cursed because of his of his unfaithfulness. I'm going to read a few of these things. I've got 4 quick lessons to learn about this parable. Our Lord is a giver of opportunities. 2 Corinthians 2:12, where we have been given opportunities to serve, develop our own powers, our own abilities, and to advance to the golden gate of heaven as well. we have been given opportunities, number two, properly used to bring heaven's commendation. So, what do you want to hear when you live your life? You know, of course, you live your life to the fullest, and you do it with the intent on going to heaven one day. But what are you going to do when you meet death at the door of your life? You go up, and he says, what have you been doing your life the entire time? Well, yeah, don't know. And so opportunities properly used are greatly increased. Opportunities properly used admit the sons of man into the house of joy. Number three, that an opportunity buried brings a curse, the dismal darkness of the outside. Here it is, change over here. And also, when you look at all these things, lastly, you know, we don't want to get caught up in being unprofitable. Lastly, the last guy was unprofitable. So in fact, by burying it, it says that he lost profit. And so you can actually lose things for the kingdom in this sense. You can actually lose things. You know, and to me, this comes out a lot when someone, you know, my background is inside working with churches that have had massive issues. Okay, I've worked with 4 churches, and I've worked on an interim basis with about 20 of them extra that have dealt with some kind of scandal or some kind of affair or embezzlement or absolute like church bullying of sorts, all kind of stuff. And what I've always found is at the center of all this stuff, number one, somebody was not behaving like Jesus, number one. And number two is somebody, which was usually the same person, was being very, very self-righteous, and how they were trying to get their, have their say and get their way without doing any work. And a lot came out to kind of micromanaging and this kind of things that came down to very, normally that person was also very, very passionate, very emotional individual. But it would come down to this, is that they tried to use the church to benefit them. And they try to use the church to make themselves look better and try to give themselves power. But in the end, they were the unprofitable one. All that was lost. And that's what got some of those guys so upset. You know, I put all this work into this church. I put all this work in over here. I did all this good stuff over here. And look at what I have left to show for it. Well, because you sowed discord and division. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? You know, you micromanage yourself to death. What do you think is going to happen? And so even though they were trying to do, in their minds, the right thing, according to them, they would be classified as an unprofitable servant. They're trying to use their talent, sure, but they were doing all with the wrong motivation, all with the wrong mentality, kind of like the third man did. You know, obviously he was saying, the message said, you're lazy. That's his motivation. He's lazy. But some would go against the church with other ideas. But so I think, we have to be very mindful about which one of these people do you see yourself the most in? Do you see yourself the most in 1, 2, or 3? Of course, and the good thing about all this is that when it comes down to our own lives, if we are a number 3, there's nothing saying you got to remain number 3. If you're number 2, you got to remain number 2. You can go up or go down. Number 1 can go down as well. Go up even more. And so everyone has a choice that we can make. We serve how we live. We know that we do all that because Christ himself left the glory of heaven, and he says, and I became your servant. Matthew 20:28, Philippians 2:6-8. And so Christ himself became a servant to God and to his fellow man. And so he gives us the same motivation and do the same thing for our neighbor as well, and for the church itself that he gave his life for. And so don't let opportunities slide without trying to make good on it. That way, when we get to heaven, God will say to us, "Thou good and thou faithful servant, enter into the joy of your Lord." What a wonderful thing it will be to hear those words at the end of life. So I'm going to stop class today. Thank you for being here. Appreciate that. Next week, we're going to go into, I wrote it down and then I left it. Let me see if I can find it. Matthew, well, I'll tell you in the lesson. How about that? I'm going to look at it without going against our time. So thanks for being in class. I appreciate that. And we'll have a picture in a few minutes.